Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Voices for Excellence. I am your host, Dr. Michael Connor, CEO and founder of the Agile Evolutionary Group. And to all my viewers and listeners, happy Black History Month. This is the second episode in the Black Excellence series. And boy, did I find Black Excellence all the way in the West Coast. We were just talking before the actual recording of this episode. And I really haven't seen Ken Shelton since the pandemic. And as we were reminiscing, I was like, man, it's been a while. But luckily, I'm doing some work in California, being able to get to see a good friend, Ken Shelton. I tell you this, been following his work forever. And I don't know how long forever is, kid, but I mean, just some of the stuff that you have been unwrapping and unpacking in the education ecosystem. Everybody is on this whole artificial intelligence kick, this whole technology software kick, but can you really get into the root of some of the core, I like to say core foundations of AI and AI technology and education? But more importantly, Ken, we were talking about this in like 2015, 2014. And Ken, I love when I follow you on social media. You're like, man, I've been saying this for years. I hear you, good brother, but now we get to unpack your excellence here on BFE. I would like to welcome Mr. Ken Shelton, international author, international keynote speaker, one of the leading voices in AI and education right now, currently developing policy and guiding guidelines as well as regulations towards AI across the country. So, Mr. Ken Shelton, yes.
Pleasure to be here. It has been a minute since we've seen each other. You said forever. I would say forever and a day because it has been a while. But yeah, it's a treat to be able to spend this time with you for sure. So
Absolutely. And Ken, thank you because of all the work that you underscore and all of the work that you're doing currently. I really like how you're pushing the limits, right? Pushing the limits with regards to AI. We're going to get into digital equity and what does equity look like in the context of software development and design and everything. I know you're going to Hong Kong. Would love to expand on that, what you're doing over there. Obviously, something great pertaining to the work that you're doing. But more importantly, Ken, thank you for exhibiting Black excellence over the course of your career. And also, happy Black History Month.
happy Black History Month to you as well. Best month of the year.
Absolutely. And Ken, I before we get into the episode, and I really love this. You started out with the history of Black History Month, and I was like, Ken, save it for the live recording. But Ken, please, as you were unpacking the history of Black History Month, please just go in depth with what you were saying, the genesis of it, how it started out, and then how it led to what we're celebrating today. Just very interesting hearing you with that, Ken.
Yeah, a lot of folks don't know the father of Black history is Carter Woodson, and it originally was it was celebrated basically like over a course of a day, and then through obviously some conversations and thinking, ultimately it expanded to a month. And what is not commonly known is the reason why it's February is because at the time the number of important Black historical figures that celebrate birthdays in February. So early on, I used to think, well, we got February because it's the shortest month of the year. But then, of course, I do my own research and I learned that that was the reason why. But I also so the audience will be able to hear this, part of what we were talking about also that I think is important is, when I taught, there were a couple of things. So last month was the holiday of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so one of the things I used to do when I would teach is I would encourage and implore the students to go much more deeply into learning about Dr. King, but really historical figures in general, beyond what is the often commonly selected and in some cases, dare I say, cherry-picked words that they use or actions that they've taken. And I carry that over, from January into February. So for Dr. King's birthday, I would tell the students, I'm like, you need to look at take a 360 view of his life. And when I taught social studies, I used to always share with the students how among my personal favorites as far as important Black historical figures, it's everything from Toni Morrison to James Baldwin, Malcolm X. I used to share the story with students on how my dad made me read the autobiography of Malcolm X at 17, and I literally still to this day believe that it definitely altered some of the courses of my life. A few years ago, I listened to the audio version, which is awesome because the reader is Lawrence Fishburne, and still had an impact on me. But in my thing, and there was another book, and it's called The Sword and the Shield by Dr. Peniel Joseph. He's a professor there at the University of Texas, but he wrote a book called The Sword and the Shield, and he does a historical analysis of the parallel lives of Dr. King and Malcolm X on how the common prevailing talking point is that the two were opposed. They had oppositional views on things like civil rights, Black liberation, cross-cultural solidarity, things like that. But what you find out, of course, if you actually take the time to go down those learning pathways, is that they may have started off somewhat having differing perspectives, views, and approaches, but as they got more towards the latter part of their life, they became much more interwoven. They both recognize the importance of cross-cultural solidarity. They recognize the importance of a shared struggle. They recognize the importance that any degree of liberatory actions or policies for Blacks in the United States was also going to benefit others as well who had experienced degrees of historical exclusion and marginalization. And so I shared leading into February because one of the other things I would do with students that, if you want to talk technology, the technology actually dismantles the barriers to this. My favorite activity is I would have the students right there at the end of January, I would have them document every single thing they do over a 24-hour time period. So it's everything from you literally got up in the morning. So you got up, you had an alarm clock, right? Okay, that's also a clock. You slept in a bed, it had sheets. What was the material of the sheet? Like try to document literally everything you do. When you got to school, your parents drove a car. Okay, so when they drove a car, did they use a GPS system in the car? Or do they ever use that? When you got to an intersection, you stopped at a stoplight. And I go through all these things and I have them document them. And then the question and the provocation is, now I want you to look at how your life will be impacted or how it's currently impacted by a Black invention or a Black innovation, and how would your life be adversely affected if those inventions or innovations were removed from it? And it's fascinating. And my favorite example is I even asked the student, like, how many of you are gamers? And, a bunch of hands would go up and say, I'm a gamer too. I go, there's one person we can blame for sleepless nights, spending more money than we should on video games, and playing probably more video games than we should. And they're like, well, who is it? I say, well, he was an engineer at IBM, and I'm going to give you the name, and I'm going to let you go down that rabbit hole. His name is Jerry Lawson, and he's the inventor of the multi-cartridge gaming system. And but the point around that, especially when it comes to learning technology and dismantling the oversimplification of any group's history. Obviously, for us, in this case, February is Black History Month. But my whole thing is, I would say there's a reason why certain groups have months. And my thing is, the month should be kind of an accumulation and a celebratory thing, not a deviation from the quote unquote curriculum. But my point in sharing that is that forced students, and not forced, that allowed students to go on learning journeys to where they started to discover like there's a lot there. There's a lot that I know, and I'm like, that's awesome. That's the point, right? That's the point of learning. I want to show you the pathway, open the door, and then encourage you to now walk that path yourself. So that's what I would do. So awesome, so much fun to do that.
It can amazing, right? Extraordinary how you're intentionally putting students in this learning pathology about discovering history that's not in textbooks. That's unpacking history that our traditional classroom practitioners might not have that specific individual context or information about that topic. Ken, I want to be able to unpack this further, right? Because of the new administration, because of the new constraints and policies around DEI work. In the context of the language now, everything that you highlighted, including the Black historians that you unpacked, would be contextualized as DEI work and history that is further, I should say, impacting this American approach, this nationalist perspective that we have. Ken, with these new policies, new legislation, executive orders that are in place, how do we truly now balance the teaching of Black history during Black History Month? Because everything you contextualize, I just aligned it. I'm like, our president just signed an executive order not to do any of that you highlighted, albeit there's such great, rich history and learning for students. How do we navigate this world, Ken?
I get asked this question quite often by educators. So what I always say is all the following things. So number one, try to siphon out the noise. There is an intentionality around obfuscating terms and terminology. So for example, I remember the CRT thing, and I would not even get into a discussion with folks about critical race theory until they could answer the following question, which is, name one of the five legal scholars that developed that framework that you've studied. Because if you haven't done that, then there's no conversation to have. And I would share with people that I've actually studied three. Number one, arguably the founder of it, I've read all of his books and looked at a lot of his writings, is Derek Bell. So this whole idea around, again, there's an intentionality around creating fear that is based on denial of access, which is one of the pathways towards what I describe as ignorance. If you don't know, then can you really talk about it? And so for me, my thing that I share with educators, you got to establish a common understanding. So in the context of critical race theory, do you even know what it is? Do you have examples of it? I know lots and lots of examples, and I even shared like one of the court cases that Kimberly Crenshaw, who's one of the other legal scholars that I've studied, there's a court case she cited where based on that and within the CRT framework, that's how she coined the term intersectionality. So this whole idea around DEI has become, it's a dog whistle for one, but two, it has become oversimplified to where DEI is often associated and applied only in context of race, which it is not. It is also cognitive ability, physical ability, anyone who has been historically excluded and marginalized. So you can even get into gender identity as well, fits within the DI ecosystem. And so a lot of it is posturing, peacocking, and noise. And I'll cut to the chase with one with teachers. Because I always say, okay, so you got this going on over here, but what are the standards? There's your answer. Because technically, if I acquiesce and I obey in advance and I don't do these things, technically, you're actually not teaching the standards. So there you go. So, and I say that in the context of not looking for excuses and not looking for outs. It's, when you're doing the essential functions of your job and you have standards alignment and standards-based instruction, you're going to teach these things no matter what. An executive order means nothing because unless they go through the effort to rewrite elements of the Common Core state standards and then they are able to successfully implement them, teaching real history, teaching all the beauty, but all of the harm and all the good and all the bad, all those things like that. You can't oversimplify and sanitize that, but then also simultaneously say that you value critical and analytical thinking. You can't. It becomes an oxymoron. And so for me, with what's going on, it's another cycle of the attempts at what Derek Bell called retrenchment.
Absolutely. And Ken, I'll tell you this. Thank you for that answer. To contextualize it, right? I had a in-depth conversation with somebody about equity, and I said, "All right, let me ask you a question. When you're in, let's say, hypothetically, a practitioner, right, has to be able to differentiate specific practices, differentiate specific strategies, use various manipulatives, academic scaffolds, right? You want your students to be able to achieve what? That lesson objective. But you're doing a variety of different methods in a differentiated manner to get each and every one of your students to that end objective, correct? And they were like, yes. And I was like, well, that's equity. And I was like, so what is the contention about the word? Have we racialized it? Have we have we politicized it where our grounded, rooted instructional practices, pedagogy 101, is underscored by equity? So, Ken, thank you for that. I know we went on a diatribe that was off of the actual script, but this was needed. This was needed.
And
This
it fits with what we're going to talk about. So it's all good.
because Ken, I purposely and intentionally brought you here because A, you do exemplify Black excellence on a consistent basis throughout your work over the course of the years, over the course of your tenure. However, you and I would say a small few unpack AI, unpack software development, solution product implementation, classroom equilibrium, i.e., pedagogy and AI, but you underscore it with this level of digital equity in keeping students in mind. 57% that are Black and brown. But I want to say this to you and D. Lanier, my man. Hope all is well, good brother. Congratulations on your most recent released text. Both of you co-authored the book. The book is entitled, for my viewers, The Promises and Pearls of AI in Education, Ethics and Equity. Here we go. The two words that I think have been missing all the time when we talk about AI. Ethics and equity have entered the chat, and it has. But Ken, I have your book, first of all. Second, when I come out there in a few weeks, I need my signed copy. So I have I like to say my sloppy copy. I get to take all the notes, and then the signed copy from the authors. I got to get D when I see him soon. But the content in your book focuses on topics that we need to continuously to unpack with this level of vitality, right? But for my audience, in essence, as they're about to purchase your book, what are the major themes of the text? And how do we truly achieve ethics and equity with AI in education?
Yeah, so thank you for giving us our flowers. I appreciate that. It's I'll share with you and the audience here a little bit of a nexus. So I've been around ed tech as an educator this entire century, and so I've seen the cycles of disruption, if you will, with an emerging technology that forces people to consider what they do and change how they do it. So I'll even go all the way back to when Google search became ubiquitously available. I remember some of the prevailing talking points at that time were, well, you can't let the kids use Google because they're just going to Google the answers. And of course, for me, my thing back then, my counter was always, well, then maybe we should be asking different questions. Okay. Then a short time later, it was Wikipedia. Well, you can't let the kids use Wikipedia because they're just going to copy and paste it. And so my counter to that was always, you mean how I used to copy out of the Encyclopedia Britannica? Okay. Then when Web 2.0 became, the prevailing narrative within not just limited to, but certainly within education. Well, you can't let the kids use Web 2.0 tools because you don't know what they're going to put on the internet, and privacy, such and such. And I'm like, okay, well, that's precisely why you need to teach the kids what responsible use is. So my point in that is, you see, I've seen this cycle over and over and over and over. And so in the context of artificial intelligence, I had a conversation with Dee where I said, I understand AI. I've read quite a few books at that point, and I know how it works. And I don't think this is one that we should sit out. And so then Dee was like, well, we didn't sit out the others. I'm like, yeah, but I think we need to step it up a little bit. And he's like, okay. I'm like, and so his response was like, well, what are your thoughts? And I'm like, I really think you and I should put our thinking on wax and we should write a book. So at first he was like, I don't know. I think we'll be okay. But then I don't remember how much time, but it wasn't that much long after that. It might have been at max a month. I got a text from him and he's like, when you have time, we should talk. We need to chop it up. And so then he called me. He's like, with what I'm seeing, I agree with you 100%. Let's roll. And so what was happening was the following was you weren't having a diversity of voices talking about AI. It was one type of voice and one stream of thought. It's amazing. Actually, two streams of thought in a binary. It's amazing. There's these cool ways you can do it. Let me show you all the cool things. And then the other binary was, oh my God, it's dangerous. We can't do it. Block it. Don't do it. Those sorts of things. But again, within that binary approach, you still only had one type of voice that was representing it. And I will say it was only white educators. Okay. And so my thing was there's a whole missing narrative here that is the perspective on who's talking about it, but also what they're talking about. And I remember someone attempted to throw shade at D and I of like, well, when did you start talking about this? And I responded, I'm like, doesn't matter when we started talking about it. What matters more is what we're saying.
Right, exactly. And Ken, let me interject for that individual out there. Ken and I have been having conversations about this since I was a principal. That was a while, and that's over 10 years ago. Continue, my brother.
And that's my thing. It doesn't matter when you, again, it doesn't matter, yeah, as you alluded to in our title, really doesn't matter when you entered the chat. What are you saying? And so for us, it was that, to write this book and to do it in the following way. So for your audience, one, it's not a recipe book. It's not a top 10 tips and tricks, and it's not a how-to. It is a thematic, philosophical, and pedagogical approach to using artificial intelligence. And that's why we have our chapter structure the way we do, so that ideally it gives you a foundational understanding of AI. It also emphasizes the importance of ethical use of AI, not just us, but also the type of ethical accountability that we can ideally put on the vendors and the developers of these AI systems. And then also looking at ways in which it is effectively implemented that dismantles historical barriers, that dismantles historical barriers that AI as an overarching term, but more specifically, our things like our generative AI and our reactive AI can do. And that's what the whole point. And that's why, and the other thing that came up, and I told Dee this when we were writing it, I said, I'm sure there's going to be some folks that are going to say, well, you had AI write it for you. Now, you know how we're going to dismantle that? And you have a copy of the book when someone gets it. AI cannot write those personal narratives that we wrote in there. Those are woven, not only are they woven throughout the book, but even in instances where we have, like, I think it's chapter 3 where I talk about bias, and we wrote it, but we add, again, we add our personal narratives in there, and we get it to where each one has either D's initials or mine, so that you know who is talking. And as a reader, we are basically inviting you into part of our conversation, which is why we have certain Easter eggs. And I think you had just mentioned one. That's why the book has extended margins, and we encourage folks to write in the margins. So there's a design intentionality there, but there is also a subconscious message there of filling in the margins, because we're constantly, in many cases, our thinking and our sharing of our learning is often relegated to the margins. So now we're saying, no, we're going to fill in the margins. And so that's precisely why we ended up writing the book. And it's why, honestly, I think there needs to be, some of these organizations need to be held more accountable. And I know we'll talk a little bit about it more, but it's why my default when they levy praise to one of these pop-up nonprofits that all of a sudden exist and it wasn't around prior to 2 years ago. And I always say, listen, if you want to understand what their approach is around AI and education, and what their core beliefs are, skip past their mission statement and go look at their team. And then ask yourself, does that team represent true diversity across all factors of race, gender identity, age, locus of control, and sphere of influence?
Amazing, Ken. Amazing. And to my audience, please, can we use this as an asynchronous method for professional learning, pedagogy, self-directed learning? And a lot of my audience members, they tune in, they go back and forth, replay specific answers. expand on key phrases. And please, to my audience, this is one of the answers that you want to be able to play back. Can I grotesque at comments about taken away from your intellectual creativity as well as your artistic work, UND, by somebody stating that AI created the content of your book? Right there is just a masterpiece of what UND unpack, how you unpack your intellectual property. So again, comments like that, it's just a level of high level of disdain that takes away from, I like to say, Black excellence, but really love how the content is integrated with one another. Yes, to my audience, is not one of those cookbooks that you identify, I like to say, abstract, very narrow strategies, but can indeed really get into those theoretical and philosophical concepts that you can be able to cogitate on and actually implement into your practices. And then also, too, and Ken highlighted it at the outset of his answer, it defies, it's the antithesis of how AI education has been implemented. I like to say holistically because it's bringing a lens. I like to say that's outside of the normalization, i.e., we're bringing a lens from a culturally responsive lens that's underscored from this Black and brown lens around AI in education. So that shifts the whole paradigm around the conversation, around the focus around solution implementation, but moreover, how are practitioners and leaders creating this equilibrium between culture responsive practices, having that lens of equity where there's that synergy of AI. But this segues into our next question, Ken. And as you're working with instructional leaders, right, classroom practitioners globally, you're going to Hong Kong next week, you have immersed yourself in many discussions as it pertains to AI in education. But Ken, in a simplistic form, what are the common misnomers and misconceptions that immediately have to be addressed to be clarified as we're implementing AI software, as we're leveraging pedagogy and AI in our classrooms? But moreover, if it's a school-wide strategy or a practitioner that wants to engage in reactive intelligence systems or generative intelligence systems, what are the misnomers that we're seeing?
Let's talk about a few that are recurring and need to be addressed. So one, I'm going to start off with one, academic integrity. That needs to be addressed, and it's interesting. There's a couple of things. So one, the haphazard levying of an accusation that using AI is plagiarism. And what I always encourage folks to do is go look at how it's legally defined. Don't take Ken's opinion. This Ken's opinion is less relevant. And how is it legally defined? Okay. Then we can get into things like cheating. Okay. And what I find interesting is how often I hear it's cheating, but then when I say, okay, fine, but then I need to know, how do you define cheating? I don't get a clean, clear definition. It's usually the definition is some variations of violation of rules or compromising or what's often heard circumventing fairness. And I go, well, rules are humanly constructed and fairness is subjective. Okay. And so that's one. Okay. And I love going after that because I think what's really going on is there is an attempt, just like I shared earlier about Google search, Wikipedia, website, there's an attempt at reasserting power dynamics so that some folks want to maintain dominion over their learners. And this now dismantles some of that. And so then they resort to things like what's plagiarism, what's cheating. Well, we need to block it. So that's one. The next one, because there's three. The next one is the gravitation towards an AI platform or AI functionality platform because everyone's doing it. That's a bias called the bandwagon effect. And oftentimes, what I always share with district leadership, and I think you will appreciate this, is that I always say before you get into acquiring an AI platform or looking at how you might leverage AI, the question to ask yourself is one, how is that in alignment with the educational goals that you have that are either delineated in your strategic plan or that are part of your profile of a graduate? And then What is the solution that you're trying to, what is the problem that you're trying to solve that the humans themselves cannot solve? And you need AI to be a digital resource to help you do it. And then, of course, the third one is in alignment with what I describe as a learner's reality. And that is, you can't effectively predict the future. You can't say, I'm preparing students for the future because you really don't know what that is. But what we can do is say, okay, this is not only an emerging technology, but it's already far more ingrained in the things that we do than people realize. And what are the things that I need to know about it? And what are the ways I can support students in leveraging it in an ethical and responsible capacity? So there are other very deviations from that, if you will, but those are the three main areas. It's the academic integrity umbrella. It's the solution, problem solving umbrella, and it's the acquirable skills and effective use umbrella.
Amazingly contextualized, compelling, right? I want to expand on your answer for academic integrity because I think you would appreciate this. So, I love meeting with kids, right? And I've met with over 75 students so far, part of my corporation's campaign. And my last question, Ken, is always, what do you want me to convey to the leaders and adults of your community as well as abroad about your interactions with AI? You know what their response is, Ken? They say, "We don't use AI to cheat. We use it the same way we use it the same way you use ChatGPT for your reports for work. We use Claude." One student say, "We use Claude to get ideas, to expand on critical thinking," right, Ken? And then one of them said, "My parents actually use it more in depth for their work than I do. So please eliminate that we're cheating. We're using it the same way you are." I found that very stark. And Ken, we're talking about where you're at in California, all the way down to the deep south, and all the way up to the northeast where I'm at in New York. They're saying the same thing. We're not cheating. But Ken, I really loved how you expand on that whole second alignment piece. And I think, and that's around that systems change, systems transformation, change management. What is a problem that you are trying to solve? I always like to say, what are the education problems that you're identifying, problem seeking within the system for problem solving? And that is in alignment to the core, the archetype of your learning organization, which is your strategic operating plan, profile of a graduate and those specific indicators, and especially that learner's reality. What I need to know and how do I support students? Ken, but I think that first one around academic integrity, we need to be able to shout that out more for kids because I think you hear it. I've been actually, Ken, and you know how analytical I am. So as you're gonna laugh at this, as of the start in November to early for January now, so far everywhere I've been, I've had heard 430, hold on, 436 times that students cheat with AI. And I'm keeping a tally all the way up until. So, because I want to say, Ken, this has been said over X amount of times in these amount of states. We have to be able to eliminate that misnomer because I mean, they're using it the way we use it, expand upon ideas, generate new concepts for them to go deeper with that. How do we eliminate that around academic integrity, Ken? Because over 400 times in a span of 3 months, that's becoming, I like to say, a macro, a macro ideology or macro ideal that our students are saying is not true. Are we not listening to them?
No. So we're not, one. And two, there's a couple of things on that. So you mentioned 436. If you and I were together, for each and every one of those 436 times you've heard that, I would say, okay, I hear what you're saying, but before we have a conversation on it, how do you define it? Like, I want to know how you define cheating. Because in the end, and I'm going to, obviously this is being recorded, so this is one of my receipts. Oftentimes, and more often than not, in fact, I can't think of an instance where it wasn't. The definition again is some variation or inclusion of the language of rules and fairness. So in our book, I want to say it was either chapter one or yeah, I think it's chapter one. I actually expand upon that because what I always say is levying an accusation of cheating, that action that you associate with cheating is a symptom. It is not a disease. And more often than not, a student will engage in that action that I choose to reframe as be compromised or potentially detrimental to your learning because of something else. So let's go back to your equity conversation. If I don't have the resources and supports, if I don't know what resources and supports exist, if the I'm in a classroom, and unfortunately this happens more often than it should, but I don't believe in dunking on teachers. So let me be clear, I don't blame the teachers because this problem that I'm going to mention right now is not a direct result of the actions of teachers. It's education as a whole. When you are in a learning environment that is structured to be competitive, you're going to get people that are going to look at what resources do I have that my classmates don't have that put me at a competitive advantage? What actions can I take to put me at a competitive advantage? And I expand upon, I think I listed like 15 different conditions that are the disease that lead to the symptom of a student engaging in action that is often described as cheating, but I choose to describe it as compromise my learning or potentially be detrimental to my learning. And so this whole idea around artificial intelligence again, it's me, I did wrote this in the intro. It's a song by The Who, Won't Get Fooled Again, and they have a line towards the end of it called "Meet the New Boss, Same as the Old Boss." Remember, I mentioned what was said when Google search came out. Can't let them do it because they're going to Google the answer. Can't let them use it because they're going to cheat. You see, it's just another version of the same argument. And my whole thing is, well, first of all, what should be happening is teachers should be supported, administrators should be supported, school systems should be consciously aware and intentional in having ethical conversations with students. For me, when I meet with student focus groups, I do the following thing. One, I say to students, I know y'all use AI and I know you've used it and use it in your schoolwork. So there's no reason to hide anything. There's no reason to be, cryptic with what you do. Trust me, I was a teacher for a very long time and I was a student for a long time. I get it. We're going to have a conversation that transcends that. And so then say, okay, how many of you had AI do your writing for you? And sometimes I would get, and I would actually qualify. I would say, when I say do your writing, not help me with ideas, I literally said, generate an essay on the following topic. It did it. I copied and pasted, returned it in. And so if you did you take time to read what it actually wrote? Because if you do that, you will find that sometimes, more often than not, what it writes, that one, you don't sound like that, and two, it's just there's something about it that you'd be like, yeah, I can't turn this in. I go, I always put it front and center, and I literally go through and I do a prompt of an essay, and I take the students through. Let's take a look at what it actually wrote. Now, so that's one part. The other part, and we have this in the book, are the three ethical questions that I love having these conversations with students on. Question number one, is it against the law or does it violate explicit school or district policy? And I always caution district leaders on is if you set a policy, for example, there was one district I had the privilege of working with, they had a policy, AI use is forbidden. And I said, okay, I'm going to share with you something. First, you need to know what kind of student I was. I was a student in school that when the teacher had 10 rules on the board, I would say, I bet you I can make that 10, 20. And rule number one was usually what? No talking in class. So the minute the teacher would say, we're going to have a class discussion, my hand would go up and I would say, well, how can we have a class discussion when rule number one says no talking in class? See, that was me. So I always share that. So your rule says all use of AI is forbidden in the district. So that means you also turned off spell check because that's a type of AI. That is a reactive artificial intelligence. And this is why you have to understand all the different types of AI system. I'm like, you're going to turn. There was another one where they said, they were saying AI use is cheating and you can't use it. And I said, okay, this is a different district. And I said, and why? Because they go, because we don't want the students having AI do their work for them. Okay. That means you also need to have a policy that forbids adult caregivers from hiring a tutor for their child. That also means you need to have a policy that forbids college educated adult caregivers from helping the child that they care for. I go, do you see how what I always describe it is that becomes this hamster wheel, a policy hamster wheel. You're just going to be constantly changing, as opposed to how do we address it at its core? And that is, we're going to put it all front and center. I know it can do your writing for you, but let's go through one, what does that writing actually look like? Two, the second question, ethical question, is how would I feel if someone did this to me? And so I did this with a group of students where I had to generate an essay, and I said, let's say you all worked on this essay and you spent hours and hours doing it, and I did what you just saw. I had to generate an essay for me in less than 30 seconds. I turned it in, and then we all got the same grade. How would you feel about that? And of course, the kids were like, that's not cool. That's not fair. I don't like it. I'm like, so if it's not fair to you, then let me go to this ethical question. Do you think it'd be cool if you did it to someone else? You see that? That's why you got to have that conversation. And then the third question that I always pose, that's also in our book, is: Am I sacrificing long-term benefits for short-term gains? And I always share with teachers, if you've got students that say, "I want to have my AI do my writing for me," okay, I'm gonna let you do that. You need to read what it wrote, but then you also need to say, I had it do my writing for me, and I'm willing to sacrifice these long-term benefits for this short-term gain. Because what that does is that creates that self-awareness, that interpersonal, meta reflection. What am I giving up later for this now? That's why I said detrimental and compromise my learning. Having those conversations, I used to do this all the time when I taught, and it's interesting because I would get in trouble for it, but I call it good trouble. Hatchet to Lake Con Lewis, because I in the first week, and I encourage district leaders to, as AI is becoming more and more and more, ubiquitously available, and if you're doing it, I say the first week of school, I would always do the following. I would spend the first week culture building, ethos building, and having the responsible ethical use conversations with students. And I would get written up for it because there were a couple of administrators in my last school who they didn't like me for a lot of reasons. I think part of it was the fact that, which given our conversation here, that I was the only black male educator at the school. But nevertheless, they didn't like it because I wouldn't get right into the curriculum. And I would say, okay, that's fine. But you know what else I'm doing? I'm culture building. I'm getting to know my student. You all say that we need to have differentiation, but I can't differentiate if I don't know the person, which means that I need to know the person to be able to differentiate to personalize. I need to know these things. Okay. You can't just jump into the curriculum and do that. And I challenged them in one of my last years. I said, here's one for you. I challenge you to pull the data on instances of classroom disruption, lack of educational goals being met, and lack of potential being realized with my colleagues who jump right in the curriculum versus me, who spends a whole week culture building, and then turn on that investment in that week pays fourfold or more dividends throughout the school year. And it's not why I do it, but it's the whole idea around let's get to know each other first. We'll do the learning. That will happen. But if you have to stop later to now essentially have that ethical conversation or responsible use conversation, you're doing two things. You're doing damage mitigation and damage control as opposed to getting in front of it right from the very beginning. So to your point and my point for the audience, I I strongly, truly believe in having the conversations with the students. Don't hide the tech because they're going to find it. I remember a story where a very large school district, it was in February of 2023, where they announced that they were going to block ChatGPT. And I messaged a bunch of my friends who are teachers in that district, and I said, hey, I want you to do me a favor tomorrow, social experiment. I want you to ask the students how many of them had no idea that ChatGPT existed until they learned that their school district blocked it, and then how many of them consequently went to ChatGPT once they realized, oh, you block it? What is that? Oh, I'm going to go check it out. There's more than 90%.
Absolutely. And Ken, and here, and thank you for this answer. This is to me beyond a master's class. Answer is a doctoral level because I want to highlight something that you have stated, right? The get moving from the disease to the symptom. And that's that root cause where I think right now we do a lot of abstract analysis and abstract interventions at the symptom level. But you always talk about getting to the core and to my audience, right? Can just contextualize in a very simplistic form about relationship, right? The culture and the multivariant ethos of culture. Let me understand my students, let me get to know who my students are and unpack who they are in order for me pedagogically to be able to reach my students. I love that whole damage mitigation leading to damage control. But Ken, and I've really loved how you frame this. And to my audience out there, you have to be intentional with the intelligence systems that you're incorporating into your classroom or district. Because again, just like we look at the alignment of differentiation, a reactive system might be that tier three support that a student might need versus access to core through a generative platform that's really unpacking, let's say, critical thinking and increasing collaboration, the utility of AI. And as Ken stated, right, AI is becoming the ubiquitous utility of our world, right? AI is the new electricity within our ecosystem. Very well explained. I was with a bunch of students and I asked the same question. And Ken, I didn't get into, the intricacies that the reason why it doesn't sound like them with the various data that is collecting the algorithms through machine learning and all that. But a young brother stated to me, he was like, yeah, that don't sound like me. That sounds like a robot. Exactly. But Ken, there we go. It does. But Ken, let me expand upon something within your text that I want to get in because you brought upon this around this whole the differences between the various intelligence systems that we have to be cognizant about, copious with how we integrate that or interject that into our organizational strategy. But I'm going to brand it out a little bit from this level of coherence, right? I love the concept you presented, Ken. Balance technological innovation. I like to, when I see that, I like to say, wow, if I don't have this really in-depth research scientific lens around AI, education, change management, continuous improvement, those three words presents a paradox for me, an intrinsic paradox, right? But it means the significance and the impact is great, right? Balanced technological innovation from a coherence, a systems coherence standpoint. Unpack that in the context of responsible AI design, development, and deployment into a learning organization.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you. So, I have the privilege of working with quite a few school districts on that. So, let's fit AI under the umbrella of ed tech. But I still see to this day, unfortunately, is the following. I see a lot of what I describe as high volume tech to support low order thinking. So, yeah, and I'm going to fit AI in this, so roll with me here. High volume tech, low order thinking.
Yep. Yep. Please expand.
So, you and I have been around for a minute. So, for everyone who's listening, at for from probably I would say 2008 for sure through 2018. I'll give it a 10-year window. There were a lot of us who were advocating for putting technology in the hands of students. Being one-to-one was a luxury, not a necessity. And of course, of no fault of school districts, the intentionality and investment in students on having devices became significantly accelerated starting in March of 2020, all the way through the beginning of the school year of September of 2020. It was no longer, okay, well, tech is a luxury. It's this thing over there. It's an add-on. It was okay because of COVID. We have to do it, and we have to invest in it. And what it exposed was a number of things. It exposed a lot of the talking points that myself and quite a few others have been screaming from the mountaintops around digital equity. And of course, for me at that time, my whole thing was not, and I told you so, it was, this is why we've been saying this. Now we need to, now we have to do it. And sometimes you hear the thing, necessity is the mother of all invention or innovation. That's what happened. But it doesn't change the fact that it's not just simply putting a device in the hands of a child. What are you doing with the device? How is that foundational to your approach, your pedagogical approach? How does it, again, dismantle anticipatory and unanticipatory barriers? And so I see this all the time, and I'll fit AI into this answer is, again, oh, we're one to one. And I always respond like, that's awesome. What are you doing with the tech? And how are you going from a low order, rote, repetitive, automated usage to high order, which, I know you'll appreciate this. Oftentimes I hear, well, we want to see kids engage. And I'm like, but what kind of engagement are we talking about? Passive or active? Because if you have me on a device, whatever that device is, and I go online and I'm answering questions that is essentially the equivalent of a digitized worksheet, I'm using tab, but that's low order thinking. So you see, again, it's not just the tech itself. It's what are you doing with it? How is it providing opportunities for what I describe as true synchronous and asynchronous collaboration? We all know that in the learning cycle, one of the most important things is feedback. How am I using the tech to provide timely, responsive, personalized, differentiated feedback? Okay, so all of those things fit within the ed tech ecosystem, and it's precisely why I always share. To your point, one of the things I'm doing with a school district is I'm working with the IT and the ed services division to establish, as we describe it, cohesion and coherence between ed services and IT. Ed services has goals that are outlined, that are specifically delineated in a strategic plan. IT has. How are those goals met? How is IT ensuring that they have a robust, equitable, and accessible infrastructure that is also reliable, that allows the teachers to do what's in accordance with the goals that Ed Services wants them to do, or that are delineated in their strategic plan? How do it's the other thing, and again, I know it's harder for district leaders to do this, but when they say, well, we're one to one, even I even say, well, that's great. What are you doing with it? But I also even ask, what was the information that led you to make the decision to select the device you did? And I have a Likert scale I use. On one end, learning goals on one end, cost is on the other end. And you got to tell me, where on this Likert scale were you in the decision you said, we want to acquire this device to go one to one? And unfortunately, a majority of the time is more towards the cost side than the learning goal side. And I go, but that's not a bad thing, because now do you see, if the cost gives the access, then we still have to identify, now that we spent the money, what are we doing that's in alignment with our learning goals? So the same thing in principles apply to artificial intelligence. You don't use it because it's there. You're using it because it's in alignment with your educational goal. To your point, one of the things I love doing with students is I'm like, one of the barriers that I know exists when it comes to sometimes when you write, and the students like, what's that? I said, you sit there and you're looking at your computer screen and you got this cursor that just flashed. And they go, oh man, all the time. And I'm like, so I'll commonly refer to as writer's block. I said, but watch this. You use AI as kind of like a collaborative thought partner. And I go, but you can't just use it. You got to use it with a specific skill set. And the reason why I say that is I still to this day see a lot of folks typing into a generative artificial intelligence platform using the same syntax that they would use in a Google search. And I'm like, you can't, because those are two completely different systems. So this is why blocking, denying, and all these oversimplifications don't help that. That fits within a construct of what I say is a comprehensive approach to developing AI literacy / AI skills, is knowing how these systems work. And even within AI, different systems work differently. So my point is, as I had the students do it, and I said, I'm going to share with you all the prompting syntax to do comparative analysis and question refinement and idea generation. And I go, how do I know what those are? Because I've done my research and I know this. I go, there is a specific command you would give it to do that. And so I showed it to them and I go, now tell me when you got stuck. And so they do it. I said, watch this. And then we did it. And what it does is the AI, it will ask me questions and help me identify my ideas, expand upon my ideas, and ultimately it led to having helping me construct. It didn't do it for me, helping me construct an outline that I then use as my starting point for my writing. And I said, now what I would do if I were your teacher is I would ask all of you to take elements of that conversation, put it into a doc, then I, the teacher, would analyze that doc using AI to look at what were the prompts and the responses you provided that were most beneficial and that should be shared with everybody in class. And then I'd put that up and make it accessible to everybody. You see that's not just using it because it's there. It's using it responsibly. It's using it strategically. It's using it critically. It's using it analytically. But here's the key: you put it out there to show here's how we use it for this purpose. And what you're doing also by doing something like that is you're modeling responsible and ethical use.
Absolutely. And Ken, and to be in alignment with that, that's digital equity 101, right? When we think about, I love the phrase, and it's so true. High volume tech, low order thinking, right? And I would, when I look at that and I immediately go to frameworks, Ken, I'm looking at it from this context of the separation and the level of focus that we have on tech, various AI solutions, the differentiation or diversity of different intelligence systems. Yes, but it hasn't really shifted instruction. It really hasn't authentically brought true engagement into our classrooms. The delineation between AI literacy and skills, foundational, unpacking the learner and the cost. Now, Ken, leading up, right? You had, I love the your answers leading up to this question because again, I want you to be able to conceptualize this vision for equity is not a forgotten entity with AI. So, from this visionary perspective, right? How do we get leaders, schools, ed tech companies? You talked about in your last answer, right? You're working with districts to eliminate silos, to eliminate these processes that have been siloed and bureaucratic over time, where AI now is bringing this dimension of interdependency where we're seeing different offices work together in this knowledge work context. But how do we get leaders, schools, and ed tech companies to keep a culturally responsive and equity lens when the demographics nationally, domestically, is stating that 57% of our students look like us, Ken? They're black and brown.
One, I dropped a link in the chat. Feel free to share it in the show notes. That is an infographic I designed titled "Higher Order Thinking in a Technology-Rich Learning Environment," and it has the characteristics and conditions. But to your question, I think there's a number of things here. So number one, I do, I'll say this. I do think that the paradigm needs to be interrogated and shifted around how often do schools buy what vendors are selling because it's available for sale, not necessarily because they have a need for it. That's number one. Number two, one of the things I always share with folks when it comes to many of these artificial intelligence platforms that exist for sale within the construct of our educational systems, as I say, the first thing I'll share with you, the first thing I always do is we're like, oh, this platform's amazing. Okay. Before I even go to the platform, I go look at their decision making and developer team. First thing I do. And what I have found with several of them, yeah, what I found with several of them is they don't have on their website, they don't have a team page. That's a red flag for me. And then even when I do look at their team, my immediate thought is always, who is on their team that at minimum has some element of representation that's commensurate with a majority of the students in public schools in the country? And pretty much all the time, not quite 100%, but almost 100% of the time, nobody. So the reason why I share that is because that tells me what perspective, what lens, and what framing they are making decisions on the platform that involve the design of the platform, the functionality of the platform, and then of course, who's trying to. What I always say is, are they trying to make a buck or are they trying to run a grift? And so I say that because it's important to recognize that there are many voices that are amongst the majority within our school systems, but are missing from the entire conversation. And I really don't want to mention any specific orgs, but I just would encourage your audience. I'm not making this stuff up. Go look at how many, here's one. Look at how many nonprofits have popped up in the last 24 months that have education and or AI in their title, and go look at their decision-making team. And I even tell people, go one step further. Those that are making decision, go look at what their background is within education. So this is why I encourage district leaders, when you're looking at this platform, don't don't try not to get caught up in the throwing up of confetti and blowing up kazoos and the pressure of, well, everyone's doing it, you need to jump on the bandwagon. I would pose some tough questions. What problem what problem in education are you looking to solve, and tell me how that problem exists within my school district or our school system? How is it going to dismantle current and as well as historical barriers? Like, I would ask all of those questions because the allure of the easy button, I get it. I trust me, I get it. Educators are overworked, overwhelmed. Let's go back to what you shared earlier. You constantly got things, whether it's from the White House, the Department of Ed, the State Department of Ed, the board. There's all of this stuff. And my thing is like, I get it because it can be overwhelming. It can compromise the well-being of district leaders, site administrators, classroom educators, but try not to allow yourself to fall into the easy button trap. And this is why I bring up things like, again, one of the biggest selling points with AI, it'll save you time, right? And so what do I always respond with? Well, before we buy what they're selling with that, let's actually take a look at what are we doing with the time that we have. You might actually find the answer with that question, and you don't need AI for that. You might.
But we don't go that in depth, right? And the questions that you're asking are so strategically and artistically crafted that it leads the practice, the throughputs, I like to say, to get to the root cause. And then that analysis, it really, we don't get to that depth of that, the depth and breadth that you're
You're
articulating.
right. And I wish we would, but again, I understand part of the reason why is because I mean, you are super you got stuff coming at you, every from every direction. And, my thing with that is this is why we as an education community have to believe in true community. Like, I'm a firm believer in communal based learning. Okay. And I think it's important for me to emphasize a lot of my approaches around communal based learning are the results of the privilege I've had of working with Native peoples both inside the US and outside the US. And I'll never forget working with Native peoples both in Alaska and in New Zealand, where, my big question that I would pose to them was, your ancestral history spans thousands of years here. What is a lesson that I can learn in our interaction about the fact that you all have been around that long, which means clearly you did something right? And you know what the through line with every single indigenous group was? Community. Collective, individual need should never supersede collective good, period. Because if the collective good is there, then by default, the individual needs are going to be there. And this is the whole idea around this. And it's also another thing I love sharing, a quote I love sharing with district leaders around which platforms they tend to gravitate towards, because there's some that, I would say I'd love to see, which of course they won't reveal it, but I'd love to see their balance sheet as to how much of their gross sales are reallocated towards their marketing. And a red flag for me, and I say this because I too was the victim of this. A red flag for me with one is if the platforms, with one of their primary marketing mechanisms is the free labor of educators, that should be a significant red flag.
And thank you for calling that out, Ken. I've seen you many times on social media calling it out, warning individuals, unpacking the alignment that you're talking about. Thank you, Ken. Please go ahead.
There's an educator, if I remember correctly, she's in Georgia. She did her dissertation on these ambassador programs, and I felt so seen and heard. Like, I don't believe that they're all. I will say this: I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I don't believe that all these programs are have nefarious intentions. But it is important for an educator to develop the awareness, and it took me years. So let me be clear: it's not like I knew this right away. It took me years to start to see that some of these programs, like I'm giving more to the program than I'm actually gaining from being a part of that community. And it was not symbiotic. But my point with all that is the line I love to share is that, sometimes the most popular platform is not necessarily the best platform. The thing I love to share is that, the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. So you gotta be mindful of just because it's first and or the most popular doesn't directly correlate to its best.
Exactly. No, Ken. Oh man. Woo! I tell you, brother, we can go on for another 3 hours, but and I can't wait. I can't wait to see you at the end of the month. But I'm gonna try to limit you. All right. This is the last question, and to my audience, this has just been an absolutely phenomenal episode. Please, I know it's going to take you time to unpack, but each of Ken's answers has a multitude. I like to say multi-dimensional, multivariant strategies, both from the district level, the site-based level, and then also classroom level, and then of course the history lesson that Ken gave us today. But Ken, I'm gonna try to limit you to 3 words. I don't know if I can, but I'm gonna try to do it. Okay, good brother. But what 3 words do you want our audience to leave with regarding AI in the AC stage of education after COVID-19?
Dismantle anticipatory barriers.
Please elaborate.
Let's use it to dismantle the barriers that we can anticipate that have likely existed from both a social and a historical context.
Beautiful. And that's the wrap. We go mic drop it right there.
What are the barriers that exist that again that becomes part of the solution that we can remove?
Hmm. Perfect. Ken Shelton, everybody on VFE Black Excellence Series. Ken, for my audience, I'm sure they're going to want to reach out to you. What's the best way to contact you by email or social media?
Yeah, so I mean, I use the socials. I'm on. I would say work related. Primarily, I use LinkedIn. You have a website, kennethshelton.net. My email is ken@kennethshelton.net. My website's going through a redesign right now, but yeah, I'm easily accessible, whether it be again on the socials or through my website. And ideally for your audience, I'll be speaking at a conference that is either near them or that they are planning on attending, ideally.
And Ken is everywhere to my audience. And everything that you experienced today, just imagine that level of vitality and energy and the profound concepts that he's presenting in front of everybody. So Ken Shelton, woo! This was an episode. Thank you, my brother. Like I said, I'll be out in California in a few weeks. I cannot wait to connect with you in person. So it seems like when we connect, it's going to be a very long time because we got still a lot to cover from this conversation.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Sounds good. And thank you, Ken. And on that note, onward and upward, everybody. Have a great evening.